Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over some severe storms which are going to be taking place over parts of the Tennessee Valley and the Southeast, as well as a little bit of snow that might even be popping up over parts of Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and parts of Pennsylvania and upstate New York. It's going to be over a very isolated area and most of it will not stick, but we're going to go over it for just a couple of minutes in today's video because it will be actually quite interesting to be seeing a little bit of flaky activity out there, even though it's already May 9th. So we're going to be talking about all of that and more in today's video, so make sure you are staying tuned all the way until the end. Here's what the current National Weather Service page looks like. You can see we have a couple of winter weather advisories up for Montana, as well as some freeze warnings and frost advisories in eastern Idaho. We have some red flag warnings scattered throughout the western United States, as well as a couple winter storm watches up for parts of Colorado and Wyoming. We have some wind advisories over the Tennessee Valley and some of the surrounding areas, as well as for a little bit of South Carolina and Georgia. And other than that, we don't have any other watches or warnings currently in place. Yesterday, we had a high temperature in Rio Grande Village, Texas, where they got up to 107 degrees Fahrenheit, and 12 miles northeast of Sand Creek Station, Oregon, they got down to 15 degrees Fahrenheit, and that was the low temperature. The highest precipitation or rainfall report was in Startup, Washington, where they got 1.27 inches over rainfall, and the highest snowfall report was tied between two areas, both in Montana, 5 miles east of Gallatin Gateway, Montana, and 12 miles northeast of Bloomfield, Montana. Both of those areas got 7 inches of reported snowfall. So here's what the current radar looks like, and yeah, some of that snow is popping up in parts of Indiana and Ohio right now. Again, it is going to be a very isolated area. It's going to be restricted to the northernmost parts of both of these states, and over, again, a very small area. And mainly what I'm paying attention to is that we do see some of these heavier precipitation bands where you see those reds and the oranges. And that's not actually heavy rainfall. That's snow mixing in the upper parts of the atmosphere, and the radar picking that up as precipitation. So on the radar, it looks like it's very heavy, a heavy rainfall, but it's actually just snow mixing in with the rain, not making it to the surface, but still getting picked up by the radar. So it looks like heavy precipitation to the radar, not in reality. Some of this is switching over because we have temperatures right around 36 to 40 degrees, which does seem above what you would typically consider is snow material, but it is going to be a very wet snowfall. We have a cold upper part of the atmosphere, and some of that will translate to the bottom part of the atmosphere. Again, I'm not expecting any accumulation, but it will look pretty if you do see a few snowflakes running around later today. So that's going to be going on. Again, not going to be too big of an issue, even though some of these models, which I'll show you in just a little bit, are showing multiple inches of snowfall. Most of that will not stick. If anything, you might get a light dusting or coating if you get stuck in this very narrow band of snowfall. And by the way, the area of concern for snowfall would be right in here, and then also into some of the higher elevations of upstate New York and northern Pennsylvania. Further to the south, we're actually dealing with real heavy rain over parts of the Tennessee Valley and along the Mississippi River Valley, where we do have some thunderstorms currently rolling around, and we're going to talk more about that in just one moment. Just to give you a look at what the snowfall looks like, according to the NOAA model, and a lot of the models have something like this with a couple of inches of snowfall. I would reduce this. I would say you're probably not going to get any accumulation if you live within this band right here. If anything, you might get a light dusting and coating that gets quickly washed away, and then this is where you might get a little bit more accumulation, maybe up to 1 to 2 inches, but the models are overdoing this just because they're not taking into account the fact that a lot of this will actually melt right away on contact. So even though the numbers look big on here, really you're dealing with maybe I would say a fourth of that, maybe a fifth of what you're seeing on your screen right now. So not a lot of snowfall is actually gonna end up sticking because of how warm it is, and also because it will be mixing in with some rain at times. So if we actually go back here, here's what the Storm Prediction Center page looks like. You can see that we do have a marginal risk, which goes from Texas all the way up through the Ohio Valley, a bigger area of slight risk, which goes from areas of Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas all the way up to the Tennessee Valley, and then we have an enhanced risk, which covers parts of Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Tennessee, and they added that enhanced risk on today's outlook. here's what the NOAA model is showing with this event. We're going to time this out for you guys. So you can see that original area of storminess, and that is going to move through parts of the Tennessee Valley. It will weaken and then eventually strengthen again as it heads into the southeast. You can see that broad area of rainfall fairly steady. Maybe, again, you see those blue spots popping up, maybe some very isolated snowfall that probably won't stick on any surfaces, but definitely might look pretty if you do get stuck in one of those bands of snowfall, those very small isolated bands of snowfall. Again, this would be by right around lunchtime today, so around 11 or 12 o'clock. We're dealing with more of that, more of those rain showers and storminess further to the south into the Tennessee Valley. If we move this forward a little bit more, you can see that by right around 2 o'clock Central Time, we're dealing with more of those storms rolling through the Tennessee Valley, now heading into parts of central Tennessee and northern Mississippi, but does not look too intense by this point. You're going to see that they really don't look too severe at this moment. They really aren't anything that's too strong or too impressive on the current NOAA model until they actually move into the southeast. That's when they might strengthen a little bit before eventually weakening again as they approach the coast. So this would be by around 5 or 6 o'clock at night tonight, and we're dealing with more of those storms popping up through, again, parts of the Tennessee Valley, and these are just going to continue to roll through. Maybe more of a severe line of storms heading in around 8 o'clock tonight Central Time, but again, these aren't going to be the types of storms that are going to produce massive tornado outbreaks or massive hailstones. These are going to be more of those weaker type of storms. You might see a weak brief tornado here and there, but most of the threats are just going to be wind damage and isolated very small hail. And you can see that band goes from Kentucky all the way down to Arkansas. As we continue this forward, you can see that by 11 or 12 o'clock tonight, that line of storms is now heading from Mississippi all the way up to Kentucky and West Virginia, and then playing this through a little bit more, you're going to actually start to see these storms actually strengthen a little bit more. So now we have two different clusters of storms. We have one in Arkansas and another one into northern Alabama. Both of these are going to be heading south and eastward, and as they do that, they're going to go into a much warmer atmosphere with a lot more instability that will help it strengthen a little bit more. So as we play this forward a little bit, here would be by 8 or 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, and you're dealing with more of these storms starting to actually intensify a little bit more through Alabama and Mississippi, and that is going to really start to strengthen even a little bit more as they head a little bit further to the south. So you're starting to see these storms, again, form two different clusters. We have that first cluster, which is into southern Arkansas and northern Louisiana, and another cluster, which again is going to be through Alabama and Mississippi. And as they move to the south, that's when they're going to start to strengthen a little bit. So this is when they pretty much hit their peak over central Mississippi and southern Alabama. And again, these aren't huge, massive storms, but they will still be a nuisance, and they will cause potentially some isolated damage because of the winds that they will produce. And you can see they continue to move to the south, but for those of you who live in parts of Florida, southern Georgia, southern Alabama and Mississippi, southern Louisiana, it doesn't look like it's going to impact you guys too much. It'll be the areas that are further inland, just because of that, again, marine layer, which I have been talking about a lot more recently, just because I think it does actually play a really big role when you have chillier water temperatures and you're overlaying that with some thunderstorms. They're going to quickly weaken as they're approaching the coast, so that will be a main factor in why these storms are weakening. If you look at a couple of these ingredients that are going to help these storms strengthen, you can see that we have Cape values between 1,000 and 3,000, mostly 1,000 to 2,500 in most of these areas, and that's really going to be one of the factors why they have the enhanced risk from this area right here, because these are going to be the areas with the most Cape. These are going to be the areas that has the most instability, the warmest temperatures, so all the ingredients will be higher in those areas, and for that reason, I'm pretty sure that's why they did put them in that enhanced risk. If we look at the high temperatures for today, you can see that we have temperatures that are going to go all the way up into the 90s for parts of the southeast. We have in parts of the central Gulf states temperatures getting up into the mid 80s, and even into the Tennessee Valley we have temperatures into the 70s. So all of that is well above what you would need to get a typical thunderstorm, and all that is just going to fuel these storms even more. Here would be by Monday. and or tomorrow, and you can see that we have these temperatures going, those warmer temperatures kind of receding further to the south. We have more of the 70s and 60s being a little bit more widespread, so it's going to be a comfortable day on Monday. But most of that activity in the way of storminess is going to be further to the south, and for that reason, the warmer temperatures are also further to the south on Monday. If we look at the dew points, these will also be quite high. You can see dew points getting up into the 70s and upper 60s for many of these areas, from the Tennessee Valley all the way down to Texas and Louisiana. Even in parts of Arkansas, Texas, and Louisiana, we have dew points that are near 74, 75. So really high over these areas. So it's gonna be really muggy on later this afternoon and early tomorrow morning. And that warm, muggy atmosphere is what's gonna really fuel these storms. And if we look at the highest wind gusts, you can also see that the bulk of the wind is actually going to take place not in the southeast, but actually in the Tennessee Valley and the Ohio Valley. So these areas are going to be dealing with winds that are going to be gusting at times to 40, 45, maybe the occasional gust up to 50 miles per hour in some of these areas. But you go away from this big area of those highest wind speeds, and you venture just a little bit further to the east, the south, to the north, anywhere you go away from this big area, and the wind speeds drastically drop off, mainly because of the terrain and topography around this area. If we look at the rainfall, we're also dealing with quite a bit, especially over the Ohio Valley, and then another area over the southeast. We'll start off in the Ohio Valley, where we're expecting about 1 to 3 inches. Even a few areas could see up to 3.5 or 4 inches of rainfall, but that'll be in some very isolated areas. And then if we look at 4 parts of Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, all these areas have the threat of seeing maybe up to about 4 to 6 inches of rainfall in some of those isolated pockets. More of a widespread 1.5 to 3.5 inches of rainfall out of this event. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.